all those systems are built with HDPE pipe. It's the perfect scenario to directional drill, cause less impact in the neighborhood. And while directional drilling, we always prefer to use HDPE pipe for all the benefits we all know and love of it. You know, the handling, the longevity, the ease of use, the ease of fusing, the expense, you know, the saving.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Peter Dyke. Welcome to the first edition of 2026, the Poly Podcast. First edition this year. Excited to be talking about HDD. And my sidekick is none other than Dan Landy, hailing from Pittsburgh. Good morning, Dan.
Hey, good morning, Peter. What's going on today?
It's a beautiful day here in Virginia. What's it doing in Pennsylvania in the new year?
It's cold. I never know if you're rubbing it in, but I'm happy to be here.
Dan, I'm not that guy. I wouldn't rub anything in.
Yeah.
I'm not that guy. But Dan, this podcast was your idea. Tell us a little bit about your interest in horizontal directional drilling and what's up with HDD, why HDPE, why are you so interested in this method?
Yeah, I definitely get made fun of for saying that I have a favorite installation method, but when people aren't a fan of HDD or HDPE, I really should say they're not a fan of HDPE, they still are drilling. They still are, in most cases, using polyethylene. So it's getting into their system, and it's actually kind of funny because they're using polyethylene. They don't even know it's in their system. These are very difficult projects. They're places that you aren't going to do open cut and see what kind of pipe you got there. So it's pretty funny. It's in their system, operating very, very efficiently, and they don't even know it's there.
Yeah, so your point is a lot of owners say they don't use polyethylene because they tend to focus on the method and not necessarily the pipe type. You know, the thing that I find funny and at the same time sad is that a lot of people say they don't want to use polyethylene, yet they already are, and or they focus on things like making sure that the metallics don't rust, they don't carry stray currents. They focus on keeping that pipe healthy when they could just select a plastic pipe.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of utilities, they don't focus on the pipe. They focus on the method, or they focus on the need to do this huge capital project. But they don't want to talk about pipe type. Do you find that interesting?
Yeah, it's funny. I was in a conversation with my friends this weekend, and we were talking about if you have a really large problem, how do you start that problem? Do you think of the first step or the final step? And I think with these horizontal directional drills, that is the first step. You're like, okay, we can't open cut, we can't pipe burst, there's a whole bunch of things we can't do. So the first step I think people take is, okay, drilling. And somewhere in the middle is deciding to go polyethylene. In that people, they just don't pay attention to the intermediate steps on how they're going to get a really difficult installation into the ground.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons, we exist and we help that process, even though people don't say we need help with it. We're getting thousands of people a year paying attention to our webinars, fewer in our podcasts, but it's an exciting topic. Well, anyway, so we took your suggestion and we're doing a podcast just on horizontal directional drilling. We met this guy through our good friends at ISCO a couple of years ago. His name is Jon Schumchyk. And Jon is a driller who has made his living. Once he left the military, he made his living doing horizontal directional drills with all pipe types, but he seems to have focused primarily on polyethylene in later years. So let's bring Jon Schumchyk on. Jon, welcome to the Poly Podcast and Happy New Year to you.
New Year all. How's everyone doing today?
Outstanding. Where are you today, Jon?
I am on Long Island, New York. Not in Long Island, on Long Island is how we say it. So Yep, the east end of Long Island, just about an hour east of Manhattan.
Ah, fantastic. Well, we've done a bunch of webinars, um, excuse me, road shows over the years out on Long Island, Suffolk County. A few of the boroughs and towns have welcomed us, and we really haven't been out there lately. John, what's going on with HDPE out on Long Island? Is it becoming a more readily accepted material?
Yes, so interestingly enough, we have a huge investment right now into our sewer system in the area because of environmental concerns of runoff into our bays and oceans around here. They're installing low pressure forced sewer mains all over the South Shore of Long Island, and eventually you'll move up to the North Shore of Long Island. And all those systems are built with HDPE pipe. It's the perfect scenario to directional drill, cause less impact in the neighborhood. And while directional drilling, we always prefer to use HDPE pipe for all the benefits we all know and love of it. The handling, the longevity, the ease of use, the ease of fusing, the expense, the saving, the savings.
So, John, how long has this matriculation to polyethylene been occurring? I mean, what's the last 10 years look like? I mean, what did they used to use? What do they use now? And when did all this start to happen?
So yeah, a lot of the municipalities are still, depends on who they are, but a lot of them are still stuck on the old metal pipes, depending on the scenario. Like you had guys that said earlier, the open cut, they generally lean towards that. But over the past 10 years, yeah, anytime they can lessen the impact to the community and not open cut and let us drill, they're letting us use HDPE pipe. And it's obviously been a fantastic transition with, less leakage and more sustainability.
So do they call out polyethylene, or do they just tell the contractor you can use whatever pipe you want? What's the bidding routine look like?
So it depends on the engineering firm. A lot of them with experience in directional drilling, if it's not their first rodeo, so to speak, they already know that's what we want to use. But some of the other engineers, maybe it's their first project with trenchless HDD installation, and they'll call out maybe a PVC or something like that, and immediately once awarded the project, we'll submit to change it to a HDPE of greater value, and they're always receptive towards it. We've never had a problem. Maybe they'll ask why. We can explain about the fusing and the cost and the ease of use, and they're always receptive to changing.
Done. That was my one question I wanted to get off my chest today. Have you done steel? Have you drilled steel?
Yes.
Okay, so I assume at some point you've done PVC, right?
Yeah, of course. Yep.
Okay, and you've done poly. So does your crew do the fusing in-house, or do you guys is it always subbed out regardless of the pipe type getting infused?
We always do it ourselves. Well, we mostly do it ourselves. I can't say we mostly do it. If it's steel, if it's threaded together, which isn't ideal, but it does happen sometimes, or if it's welded, or we'll do it ourselves.
Okay, because do you like to consider yourself a specialty contractor?
Yes.
Okay, because
Sure.
some people they don't like, I think, when I make that comment, but I've always considered it a specialty. So it's kind of like a mechanical contractor, right? Like the general contractor is doing everything, but the mechanical is going to come do 3 different systems for you. So the handoff point from the specialty contractor, in your case the driller, to the GC, I've heard not everyone does their own fusing. I was just very curious if you guys do, kind of what your thought process is there.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, a lot of directional drilling contractors, all they want to do is drill. They want to send rods out. They want to pull rods back. They'll tell you, get whatever pipe you want us to put in. At the other end, we're going to hook to it and we're going to rip it in the ground. Right. So I guess that's one business model, right? It's 2 guys with a drill, a mix system, and a vac. They're going to come in for as cheap as possible. They'll most likely get your pipe in, right? But yeah, we've always provided more of a turnkey solution where we'll give you a pressurized HDPE pipe from this end of the job to this end of the job. When we leave, you'll be able to hook it up to your septic system and flow your stuff right down the river here.
So let's take a step back. I love this way this conversation's headed, but let's find out a little bit about you, Jon, who you are, and what your experience has been.
Sure. So I guess big picture, as you said earlier, I got out of the military. Oh boy, it's probably been 15, 20 years ago at this point. And then, yeah, my brother was a cable contractor here on Long Island, and I partnered up with him. The company was Eastern Utilities Contracting Corporation, and him and I built the company over the years. We went from pneumatic hand missiles and open cutting. Eventually, we got a directional drill, and we became, him and I, one of the largest directional drilling contractors in the New York metropolitan area. Eventually, we were bought out by a larger construction conglomerate where we stayed on board with them, building the company over the years, and that was about 5 years ago. And until Tommy and I recently, Tommy's my brother, my former partner, we recently separated from the company, and now we're back out on our own. Just starting over in the industry.
Good. Will Tommy join you in your new venture?
I don't think so. I think he's for all those that don't know, he's quite a bit older than me. We always ask our parents how that happened, but we never get a clear answer. He's 14 years older than me, so he's been more like my father than my brother over the years. He'll continue to be, involved if I have a question. He's a brilliant guy, technically, just brilliant, and I lean on him for a lot of knowledge. So he always took that end of it. I always took more of, of the strategic end of it. But I think in one capacity or another, we'll be working together forever. You can't get rid of me.
Well, for the younger folks listening to this, I think the lesson there with you and Tommy, Jon, is we all have mentors. And when I joined this industry 15 years ago, I had several mentors. Dan, I think the same's true for you.
Yeah, for sure. It's nice to learn from other people's mistakes, but this probably applies to drilling more than anything, but you just don't know what you don't know. And it's hard to not be humble in this difficult of an industry. That's I'm sure you're still seeing stuff that, maybe not your first time completely seeing it, but
sure. Well, I mean, the thing that made our partnership so successful is I was always more of the conservative, the thinker, the this, the that. Tommy was more of the tactician, like, we're going to figure this out. We're going to do it. It's nuts and bolts. And he was always willing to take the risk, and, it always worked out well in the end. So
well,
yeah.
I think you guys would agree that the key to learning in a new industry is being humble, as you said, but also being open to doing what Dan said, and that is realizing what you don't know. And if you think you know it all, you're not going to succeed in the polyethylene world. As much as we like to say, Dan, it's really easy, clean it, shave it, heat it, fuse it. It's just not. It's not easy, because it's not putting a bell and spigot together. You have to understand heat fusion. You have to understand the way this pipe is put together, the way it flexes, the way it performs, and the way it fails if you're going to succeed. And, people have been critical of me for years, Jon, for talking about failure. But the whole reason we're successful in this industry is because the other pipes fail so much. Yes, and people are just so reluctant to talk about failure. So, to us, it's an advantage because we don't fail the way the other materials do. Yeah. And yet there are failure mechanisms for us that we need to pay attention to. Would you guys agree?
Absolutely. I mean, to your point, Peter, when we first did our first big highway crossing here, it was a 20-inch water main, if I remember correctly, and we had a technician come out with the fusing machine, and we paid him for his time and for his knowledge, and he gave all our guys a class and got us all certified. And I really couldn't, when it got to the pipe to be that large, I couldn't believe the amount of science and thought and technology that went into each one of those fusions. And I was hooked at that point. I was super impressed, and just to hear about all the technology that's gone into just putting a fusion together was astounding.
Well, one of the things that McElroy's done great, Jon, is they've really made the science of interfacial pressure accessible. We're trying to get somewhere between 60 and 90 pounds of pressure for every square inch of pipe there is on the wall. And the data logger and these I-series machines, they make it so you can understand that, that drag pressure, which is normally a very foreign concept to people that are in the construction business. I mean, they know they've got a certain pull force to pull that pipe string toward a fusion zone, but you dumb it down, it's called drag pressure.
Right.
And if there's too much drag, you're not going to get the correct amount of interfacial pressure for the fusion. And McElroy's made it so that you can understand that complicated formula easily.
Yeah, and be confident, with their and forgive me, I'm not the technical guy, but I know their data logger and the data that they produce, it ensures that your fuses are done properly and you have proof that they were done properly.
Yeah. So, again, we're digressing, but do you use those data logger reports when you're bidding, or are you just using them to justify what you did to the inspector?
We would use it at the testing portion, yeah, and as backup at the end. I can't recall them ever coming up in the bidding stage, but we would log them as just assurance that everything was done to spec at the end of the project.
All right. Well, there's a certain group of people out there listening to this podcast or watching on YouTube that don't really understand horizontal directional drilling. Jon, could you give us a 5-minute review of what HDD is and how it works?
Sure. So HDD, horizontal directional drilling, is a trenchless technology. Machine sits on top of the ground, and the long and short of it is it sends rods downrange, down the borehole, and there's a steering mechanism, whether it's walkover or wireline or geo, and that tells the operator exactly where the end of the drill rod is. And you'd use this technology to go under a road if you didn't want to open cut it, go under a river if you didn't want to pay the marine contractors to lay the wires or the pipe on the bottom of the river. You'd under train tracks, you'd use it to get past something that you otherwise couldn't open cut for installation. So the rods go through from the sending to the receiving pit, as they say. If the pipe is small enough, you can just hook it directly to the drill rod and pull it back through the ground. If the product is larger than the drill rod, you'd hook a reamer on, and you do the reaming process of displacing the ground around the drill rod until the hole is large enough that you could drag the product pipe through. During this process, you're pumping drill mud through the end of the drill rod, and that drill mud acts as essentially a placeholder for the dirt that you displaced with the reamer. And so there's never a void underground. So people always worry about settlement. It's generally not a concern if you drill properly, because any of that dirt that you're removing in the drilling process, you're replacing with the drill mud. And then
so the drill mud ends up staying underground post construction?
It does, yeah. And then when you pull the drill rod, when you pull the product pipe in at the end, all that drill mud will come back out. So then you're displacing the drill mud with the product pipe. And then you have to deal with it with a vac truck or a recycling machine. And then around the product pipe will be whatever the remaining drill mud is.
Okay, I need to stop you, Jon, because this is a major talking point. So we say in the polyethylene world that you don't need to use anchor blocks. And the reason is, if you have a little bit of soil on the pipe, like in a normal open cut, that's enough frictional resistance, the pipe's not going to move. Now, although HDD is the most studied, everyone has a standard on it, it's the most technical information for any installation method. Although that's all true, the soil interface between that mud and pipe with very, very little frictional resistance, and what does that look like over time as the mud dries out? Like, no one knows.
Right.
You typically assume that there's little to no resistance and just put anchor blocks on both sides of your drill. Or are you pouring concrete on the terminal connection? Basically,
I understand the question, and it's kind of a long answer. So for an example, if we're directional drilling under a set of train tracks, right? Mm-hmm. And they're going ductile iron on one side, ductile iron on the other, and they just want HDPE in the middle, right? In those scenarios, yes, they'll want you to pour anchor blocks around that short piece of HDPE so it doesn't pull or stretch one way or the other, and perhaps pull out of the mechanical joint coupling that hooks it into the ductile line. Whether it's necessary or anything, I honestly don't know. It's spec, so that's what we do.
Okay.
Most of our installations, that it's only really in that scenario where a set of train tracks is 100 feet wide, 200 feet wide. Once you're getting, 300, 400, 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, it's highly unlikely that pipe is going to move anywhere, right? And if we're not hooking into existing ductile line on either side, we're just continuing to drill down the road. So you could have a 2-mile long system of HDPE pipe you've just drilled in, and those are just fused into sewer structures or whatever you're installing, at the interim points. And in that scenario, we wouldn't need to use poured anchor blocks.
Okay. Yeah. And for everyone, a lot of the people listening aren't drilling contractors, John. So if we're, I think mansplaining might be the term, our exact questions, it's because, yeah, we do have, not everyone drills all that often. So thanks for the detailed explanation. That's really helpful.
Yep. No problem.
All right, just to review. So the drilling mud replaces the displaced soil and rock that's been removed during the boring or reaming process. So boring is the initial bore. Reaming is we're making the hole bigger to be 1.5 times the diameter of the carrier pipe, correct?
Correct.
So you pull the polyethylene in. Now you have still a space between the OD of the polyethylene and the ID of the reamed hole. And you're saying that there's a remaining amount of drilling mud that fills that annulus.
Correct.
And that stays there.
That stays there. Yep.
And hardens.
Hardens. Yep.
Okay. To the people out there that say, "Oh, what are the nasty chemicals that are in the drilling mud?" What do you say?
It's just Wyoming bentonite clay. That's all it is. There's other additives you can put into drilling mud, but your standard drilling mud is just bentonite clay that they've been using for drilling operations for many, many years.
And so you just add water to it to make it more manageable?
Yeah, and again, there is other chemicals you could use, other additives if you're in groundwater, if you're in swelling clay, if you're in sugar sand, stuff like that. There's other things you can add to it to give it a different viscosity. But generally speaking, especially here on Long Island, we have really nice, soft, drillable clay mixed with sand. We can get away with just bentonite water in most scenarios.
Now, one of the projects that we love to hail as being fantastic for polyethylene is when polyethylene saves the day. So like there's a huge sewer blowout like Fort Lauderdale had several years ago. They flooded the intercoastal waterway with millions of gallons of sewage, and polyethylene and drilling combined together come in and save the day for Fort Lauderdale from this terrible problem they had with pipes that were failing. Your projects, are they save the day type projects, or are these well-planned CIP projects that utilities let?
Yeah, most of these projects are just well-planned capital projects from designed by an engineering firm for a municipality or for an owner.
Got it. Now, in the past, you've told me about one of the cool projects that you worked on when you were with Eastern Utilities, and that's that conduit project coming from Quebec all the way down to Manhattan. Tell us a little bit about that job.
Sure. The Champlain Hudson Power Express was electric, hydroelectric from Quebec, Canada, down into Queens, New York. We were lucky enough to be one of 4 directional drilling contractors to work on that project. Over the span of about a year, we completed about 100 directional drill crossings of waterways, highways, train tracks. It was a great project. At the time, it was the largest renewable energy directional drilling project in the country.
What was the source of the power?
Hydroelectric.
So the French Canadians were selling their electric to the state of New York.
Roundaboutly speaking, yeah, that's how I understand it.
Wow. So they actually get along. That's great to hear.
Yeah. 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 So it was a great project. The scale of it was huge. Very successful. So yeah, we were thrilled and honored to be a part of it.
Well, the Canadians are fans of polyethylene, John. We do a lot of projects up in Canada. Throughout the provinces, polyethylene is well understood. Do you feel that New York has a good attitude about polyethylene? Or are we still in early days?
I think they do have a good attitude, but I think we are in early days. I think there's a ton of potential here. With some current projects that I'm working on, I see a ton of avenues where we could use it more effectively for manhole installation, a lot of the drainage, obviously a lot of the electric. Yeah, there's a lot of avenues polyethylene could move into in my neighborhood.
So on that Champlain project, give us a couple of the challenging drills that you had and how you solved the challenge that you came across.
Um, a lot of the railroad crossings were difficult. Just working with the railroad companies, they're very particular about how things are done around their tracks. Obviously, there's a ton of exposure for them. If the tracks are moved, a millimeter, it could cause a catastrophe. So that was really one of the biggest challenges, was just working with them and making sure their standards were met. While still obviously needing to perform at our job and be profitable, we had to take extra care to do things the way they want them done.
So in the water industry, under train tracks, we typically have a carrier pipe and an outer pipe. Is the same thing true with conduits for electric? How does that work under railroads?
So as I understand it, there were several trenchless crossings where they needed a steel casing. We were not involved in them. Those were to be done by an auger bore contractor. All of our crossings were done HDD, and we were able to get deep enough where that was an issue. I guess they had a certain threshold where if it was below a certain depth, they were good with just drilling and installing the HDPE. If it was shallower and the ground could sustain it, they would want their steel sleeve, like you said.
We did a whole webinar, John, on how to work with railroads. That's why I was laughing.
Well, you could probably do a couple more because it's difficult, man. There's a lot to know.
Yeah. So how do you guys manage knowing that? Like, I'm sure you've done them in the past, but are you the one that's, sitting and like looking at a plan set and thinking about everything it's actually going to entail on site with all the tracking and, like queuing you see on the.
The projects come pretty well designed. I mean, we do submit how we want to do things, and how it's actually going to be built, but they do come very well designed, and you get a strict criteria about how things are going to be performed, and that's supposed to be reflected in your price. So, be sure you don't miss anything, and you're going to hold these standards no matter what.
I have a comment that I've received before, and tell me if you think this is offline. It's not mine. But I've heard that dealing with the railroads, there's a pretty tight correlation to how bad they want a capital project done. So in that case, like, bringing hydropower to New York is pretty, there's a lot of ships sailing in the right direction. Were you getting answers probably more quickly than you would on a traditional railroad crossing?
I don't know. I think the railroads hold a high standard. I don't think they're very picky. I think they understand that all these projects need to get done, but things are going to get done safely, and in the way we all need them done, right? The way they want them done. They approve their flaggers for all the crossings, because remember, we're not near roads, right? We're back in the woods, and every time you cross the tracks, you need a certified flagger, certified by whichever railroad owns that track at that point, right? So I mean, that's just how it's going to be, and that's got to be reflected in your price when you bid the project. But so to answer your question, I don't think we got special treatment because it was a large project. I think we just went above and beyond and gave them what they wanted to see.
Awesome.
So John, in municipal projects, our advice to engineers and owners is test the pipe strings. So if you're running a 500-foot pipe burst or a 500-foot drill, you're going to pressure test that pipe string at grade before you pull it in. That's our advice anyway, because we'd rather, if you find a problem, you find it before it's pulled in. What is your routine with pressure testing pipe strings?
Sure. If the whole pipe string can be assembled before it gets pulled in the ground, yeah, we would test it before we put it in. And then once it was in, and it was hooked up to the system, we would test it again. So you'd have kind of a dual testing procedure.
So if it's a conduit like the Champlain project versus one of your municipal sewer jobs, are you doing pneumatic testing?
So no, the Champlain Hudson was electric, right? So you wouldn't there wouldn't really need to be a pressure testing that it would hold pressure, hold water or air pressure at the end. So in that scenario, you could just use your data logger information to make sure that.
Okay, so conduit strings are not pressure tested.
It depends on the engineer, whatever their spec would be. But I mean, generally, like if for any other electrical project, you wouldn't have to pump up the pipe before you pulled it in. It would just be, your record of testing would be provided by your data logger information.
Right. So you told Dan earlier that you have experience with drilling other materials, particularly steel and some PVC. Now, is that bell and spigot PVC or is that fusible PVC?
Both. Yeah. The fusible PVC, we've done a little bit of the bell and spigot PVC. We've done quite a bit of here in New York. Some engineers rate that for the highway crossings for electric. You put the bells together and there's a little zip tie thing you stick in there. It's called bore guard. We've used that before. It's, difficult to work with, to say the least, but we've done it.
So help our owners and engineers who think PVC. Let's just say they think PVC is a better material than polyethylene because they know it. They don't really understand polyethylene. Help them understand from your perspective what the difference between the two materials is.
Sure. PVC, I'm sure it has its place, right? But it's very brittle in my point of view. You're dragging it through the ground, remember, we are going through the earth, right? So there's rocks down there. A pointy rock falls out from the top of the borehole, hits the PVC. For all its strength, it'll just shatter. It'll just splinter. Whereas HDPE will not. It would just bounce off. Maybe put a little gouge in it, but most times not. But that's what we've noticed more than anything. It's just PVC is very brittle. If it bangs off a rock, if it bangs off something metal, it'll just shatter and break apart.
In the last 5 years, has that ever happened to you?
Many times. Many times.
Really?
Yes.
So what do? Do you just abandon and drill right next to it and try it again?
Start over, yeah. Whatever you got to do to get it in. Yeah, but it does happen. And it sits out in the sun as well. It can get very brittle, and just moving it around on top of the ground, drags up against something sharp. And then you just gotta cut it off and start over.
How does the drilling operator know that he has damaged the PVC?
Well, you're pulling the pipe in as the product pipe, and you're still pulling, and then the pipe on the exit side isn't going in the hole anymore. That would indicate to you that it's broken off.
Wow, pretty obvious to you. To somebody like me, no, it's not that obvious. I know you're trying not to laugh and give me a hard time.
No, it's pretty standard questions, but yeah, that's worst case scenario from a drilling point of view, right? We worked all day, we worked all night. You could have worked for months on this borehole, and you're pulling the pipe in, and all of a sudden you're dragging and it's not going in anymore. Now you have a real problem on your hands, because you were planning on being done in a half an hour, and now you're not even close to done.
Yeah, you're starting over. Actually, no, you're recovering, then you're starting over.
Yeah, you gotta hopefully get that pipe out of the hole. Unless it's too far in, you can't drag it back out the other side, and you just have to, you could grout it and abandon it and start again.
So one of the reasons I think people like some of our content, Jon, is that we are realistic. What are some of the things that have happened with polyethylene that you'd want other contractors to know? Like, have you damaged the pipe pulling it in, or doesn't fuse correctly, or you're doing it in the winter? Tell us some of the realistic stuff that you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, those are all fair assessments. Working with any material in the winter is obviously more difficult. And here in New York, we get some decent winters. So yeah, I mean, we deal with polyethylene coming off a reel. 4-inch pipe comes in 500-foot reels. Trying to deal with that when it's cold out. It's kind of hard to explain here on a camera, but the pipe's been in a coil for months probably, and now you hook a pulling head to it and you're trying to drag it in the ground, and it's got this wicked curve on it that you don't want to let go. And then yeah, if you don't handle it properly, you could kink it going into the ground. Not very common, but it does happen, right?
Yeah. So what I'll say there is, we have what's called Dan, what do you call those trailers?
A line tamer? I'm trying to find the video.
Yeah, a line tamer.
Yeah.
So it actually tames that curve. You run it through, and it really works. It's harder to do. It's harder to do in the winter, but McElroy sells them. They're fantastic tools, and I'm sure you've rented them before.
Yeah, we have. Yep. But it just adds another level of complexity to the project, right?
Right. All right. So now you're not a contractor anymore. You're a consultant to owners and engineers. What do you want owners and engineers to know about polyethylene HDD that you wish they know? So you have better bid sets, and you see more polyethylene saving the environment in Long Island.
Right. It's a great question. So what we see a lot is for the owners and the engineers want to end the HDD and they want to end the HDPE as soon as possible, right? So as soon as you get beyond the extent of the water or of the highway or whatever, they want to end it and start back in with their open cut, right? Because they're figuring, well, if it costs me X amount of dollars to cross this track, it's expensive, right? The drill is expensive. But if we make the drill shorter, it'll be cheaper. It doesn't work like that, right? So a lot of times we'll bid something and it's a 100-foot shot, and we'll have to explain to them, I'm going to be 100 feet that way and 100 feet that way before we start, just to get your section of pipe in. So just because your shot is shorter, it's not going to be cheaper, right? So just these conversations we have to educate people, right? We need a setup area. It's got to be level. We're not going to be on the edge of the road, and your open cut isn't going to save you money more than we could save you if you just let us drill the whole thing. And at a certain point, drilling gets cheaper the more you do, right? Because we have startup costs. I've explained to contractors a lot of times, they want me to come and just shoot a road, right? I'll say, I can do the whole job for you for the same price, because I got to bring all my stuff there. I got to set it up. The setup is the longest part. Once we're drilling, we could, whether we're doing 100 feet or 400 feet that day, it could essentially be the same price aside from the cost of the material. So it's just a different way to think about it, right? You shorten up the job for us. A lot of times it's not going to save you money.
Let's say you're doing 1,000-foot drill, on Long Island, and the setup is, you're going under a road and you're going to keep going 300 feet on either side. What's the timeline look like on a typical project?
Well, that's another difficult question, but 1,000 feet, a day to set up, a day to tear down, 3 days to drill. So 5 days, we could get it in most times, unless you're in downtown Manhattan, then you're talking.
Then you're not drilling.
Yeah.
Seriously, you're telling me 5 days to do 1,000 or to do 1,000 feet?
Sure. Yep. It depends on the ground, but here in Long Island, like I said, we have good ground, and yeah, we've done far more than that, to be honest. But yeah, that would be a good conservative roundabout figure how look at a job like that.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Dan, any final questions for Jon Schumchyk?
Yeah, I have a comment that I make pretty often, John, and I hate making it because it feels like I'm passing the buck. But I always tell people that on these drilling jobs, they want to know, like, well, what is feasible, what is reasonable. And I always tell them, you need to reach out to a local drilling contractor, because if everyone involved in the project, they really are going to know most or best. Your experience, I don't know how large your service zone was, but do you feel like that's a pretty good rule of thumb that the contractor is going to know, even more so than the engineer, of kind of what's feasible or reasonable?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say we're going to know better than an engineer, but I mean, we know our machines, right? And just from using them every day, we can kind of look at something and tell you yeah or no, right? And most scenarios that I can think of off the top of my head, everyone's very receptive to that. They know we've been in the industry for years because we know what we're doing, and they do take what we say into consideration. Um, but yeah, I would agree. They do lean on us for our means and methods expertise.
Yeah, I think people get nervous about losing their borehole, depending on the soils. I think that's probably, at least the questions I get, I think that's the number one concern I hear about, is if they're going to be able to keep bore pressure throughout the drill.
You mean borehole? Oh, I see what you're saying. So losing
Dan,
pressure.
are you saying frack out? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I didn't know if I was, I was trying to be political. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
I mean, frack out, losing borehole pressure, for everybody out there. That's just when while you're drilling, you want the mud coming back to the drill or out the exit side. You want it going through the borehole, to one end or the other, so you can clean it up and deal with it. Frack out or losing borehole pressure would find the path of least resistance in the center of the borehole and mitigate its way up through, to a street or to a waterway or something, which could be a nightmare. So yeah, you want to avoid that. And generally, you do your homework and you're deep enough. I mean, listen, it does happen. It can find a root or an old structure and follow that up to the surface. So it does happen, but you have pressure monitors on your machines, and you kind of know when that sort of thing is happening, and you deal with it as it comes.
So how much pressure does a typical drill need to maintain adequate pressure in the borehole?
That varies greatly by ground conditions and by the drill and by how much fluid you're pumping and to be honest, I haven't operated many years. I'd be the wrong person to start quoting numbers and figures, but every drill and every ground scenario is going to be a little different. But you're going to get a baseline as you're operating, and you're going to see when pressures either drop off or skyrocket, and you're going to know when you have a fluid issue.
Got it. Well, Dan, anything else for Jon?
No, that was the big one I wanted to get out there. No, this is very helpful. I appreciate your time, Jonathan. This has been
my pleasure. Anytime.
And Jon, anything you want to add?
Was that for me?
Anything you want to add?
No, just that it's an honor to work with you guys, and I love the organization, and anything I could do to help out and help grow PE pipe to all the municipalities and owners we work for would be great for us, great for you guys, and just help build the industry, right?
Well, we really appreciate you doing things like this. You helped us at Showcase this year and last year, and getting to know guys like you really helps Dan and me communicate effectively to everyone, since that's what we love to do. We love to share this message because it's a really good message. I've said this many times. We put our head down on the pillow at night. We know we're helping. We're making society a better place because the product is better. It doesn't fail the way other materials do. It's easier to put in. You can do 1,000 feet in 5 days. Your words, not mine. That is very cool.
Yep. No, I believe in it as well, and I'll always promote it because it's a great product. So
yeah. Well, Jon Schumchyk, Happy New Year to you and your family. So,
I have one last question.
Dan.
Yeah. So I am typing notes when you're talking. I'm not just watching football or something. But you made a comment 15 years ago. You started in telecom or
correct.
Telecom. Okay. So we've exploded in telecom, not just, water and other industries. So did you feel the boom when the telecom and communications really, I guess maybe 7-8 years ago? Coil cleaning?
Our boom was probably longer ago than that around here.
Okay.
We built our fiber optic network. You know, right as I was getting out of the military was when it was really, really booming here for us. So 15, 20 years ago. And yeah, so they changed over actually from just a straight cable that you would put in the ground to what they called CIC, cable in conduit. So we would get a roll of 2,500 feet of pipe, and it would come with the cable already inside of it. So yeah, that was my first exposure to HDPE was when I first started out, and we'd drag that pipe in the ground right off the roll, and it would already have our wire inside of it. We cut it back and then, splice the wire in. So yeah.
So are the drilling contractors, is there a crossover between people doing telecom and people doing water?
Yeah, sure. Most drillers will drill any pipe, anything you need installed, they'll install. Again, like I said earlier, we always took more of a turnkey approach where if we're doing your water service, we'll do the whole thing. We'll tie it in, we'll tap the main, we'll tie it into your house. If we're doing, when we were doing the telecom, we had splicing contractors that worked directly for us. I used to splice myself back in the early days. And,
Nice.
yeah, we would get into all facets of whatever industry was booming at that time.
Okay. Yeah. I want to get that off my chest. Thank you. Sorry, Pete.
Yeah, Dan, it's about you. Anything else we can do to make you feel more comfortable, Dan? John, you want to help Dan?
Yeah, I'd love
You
to.
have my address. Uber Eats. I'm a little hungry. It's almost lunchtime.
All right. Happy New Year, fellas. Jon Schumchyk. I look forward to next time. And to our listeners and watchers, thank you for supporting the Alliance's educational programs. Join us on the next webinar coming to you. Check out our website at pepipe.org, events, and watch us, listen, pay attention, ask us some questions, and bring projects to us so guys like Dan can help you. All right. With that, we'll see you at the next podcast next month. And with that, Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
See you guys.